Hey everyone, I am Mac. We've got Mike. Wait, there we go. And we are going to talk about what's going on with ComicCon at home today. So Friday is technically the second day of ComicCon at home, but we didn't really have much going on yesterday. So this is our first time really diving into it this year. So kind of interesting to be getting another virtual con like this when it seems like things are mostly back to normal.
Yeah, I remember being in this situation a year ago and thinking, I can't wait for July 2021, be back in San Diego and at my favorite place, San Diego Convention Center, and just enjoying all the panels and the dealers on the floor and everything. And yet we're still here talking about virtual panels, which are not nearly as exciting.
How many San Diego Comic Cons have you been to?
Well, let's see. I would guess about 15.
Wow. Okay.
Because I started in 2003 was my first one, and I skipped a couple in between there, but mostly I went pretty much close to every year since then. So I would estimate about 15.
I am jealous. I have not gotten out to San Diego Comic Con at all yet. I've done New York Comic Con and some cons in Philly and stuff like that. But once things get up and running again with SDCC, I can't wait to get out there someday.
Yeah, it's such a great feeling. I don't know, there's something about it. I really honestly miss it. Like, that was my thought this week as this virtual con was approaching. I was like, I miss this tradition so much that we have of, like, okay, you get 5 days, and I've been doing it for work the last few times as well. So it's like, it's 5 days doing all sorts of stuff that I really enjoy and getting to do it for work, and being among your kind of people for that long is just great. And I kind of live that life anyway in LA. Like, there's a lot of people who are into pop culture who live in this town, obviously, and same is true down in Orlando. But there's something different about that atmosphere of just nonstop for 5 days. You're just immersed in that environment. So I can't wait for, I won't say 2022 because who knows, but I can't wait for the next Comic-Con, whenever that may be.
Yeah, don't jinx it. But it's funny that you mentioned, you're watching these things that you love, and here we are. We're here to talk about a Marvel and a couple Marvel and Star Wars panel here today. But we also, covering the event, we get some panels of things we've never really heard of or followed along with. Like, for example, I covered one today that was a show that I had never watched previously, and I checked it out today, and I really love it now. So I like that. We kind of get thrown into these new things this way.
Well, it's kind of similar to the actual Comic-Con experience, because often, you'll want to see a panel really badly, but they don't clear out the room between the panels at Comic-Con. So you got to, like, stake out your seat probably several hours at least before your panel is going to start. So you end up getting exposed to all this stuff you haven't heard of before. Sometimes it'll catch on with you, and sometimes you'll be like, I have no interest in that. But that's the rolling of the dice that is Comic-Con.
Absolutely. So let's jump into the panels that we did cover today. So we had 4 total, and we'll start off with the couple of Marvel panels that I covered. The first was Marvel Comics X-Men, and it featured several of the X-Men or mutant or X-Universe writers going right now, as well as Jordan D. White, the senior editor for X-Men Comics. We had Jerry Dugan, Vita Ayala, Benjamin Percy, and Leah Williams, who are making up most of the X-Men related stories, including X-Men. X-Men proper. The actual team is back, and we just had X-Men 1 a couple of weeks ago now, which seems crazy to say that we just had X-Men number 1 released. But Marvel or comics numbering is always strange.
Can I interrupt and ask you a question about that? Because I go to the comic shop every week, mostly get Star Wars stuff, but I occasionally will buy Marvel stuff as well. I mean, the Star Wars stuff is put out by Marvel, but I occasionally buy the superhero stuff. But how often are we resetting to number 1 these days? Because it seemed like when I was a teenager, most of the Marvel comics were in like the 300s. Like I remember Fantastic Four was in like 375 or something when I was at the height of my comic fandom, and then Spider-Man was around the same, and X-Men got up there, and then like they started realizing that number ones sell a lot of money, so they would just put out a number one, not reboot necessarily because it's the same continuity, but just kind of restart the numbering. So they do this how often these days?
It's pretty often. It's basically every time they change a creative team, they'll just renumber the series for that team. And I mean, that's not always the case, but that's usually the case.
Yeah. And then the funny thing to me is like they'll keep the legacy numbering underneath it. So then now they have like their cake and they eat it too, because then they'll get to 700 and they'll change it back to the original numbering. It'll be like, oh, so never mind that number one. And now we're up 700. You can buy that one.
Yeah, so. A perfect example of that, I think, if you go into our comic reviews on Laughing Place right now, in the recent couple of months, I think we have a review for something like Venom number 36 or something like that, and then a couple weeks later it was Venom number 200. So it's exactly like what you said there. But yeah, so this creative team that we had during this panel, they are writing X-Men, Marauders, Children of the Atom, New Mutants, X-Force, Wolverine, and then the upcoming X-Men: The Trial of Magneto, which is a continuation of the Hellfire Gala series that just wrapped up. Well, story arc. I won't say series because it was over the course of different series, but that resulted in a pretty major event in Marvel Comics and the death of the Scarlet Witch. So things are pretty exciting on Krakoa and in the world of the X-Men going forward. So they kind of teased a little bit of what's coming up, but didn't really give too much away. For example, Jerry Dugan, who again is writing X-Men, he told us that Krakoa is not just representing, or the X-Men are not just representing Krakoa, they're representing the Earth as a whole. And so they're going to be having some issues with some other worlds. And he promised some non-traditional X-Men villains, as well as some old favorites of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So a nice mix of the classic and the new there. So I'm excited for that. They also just kind of talked about their favorite moments in these comics from the time that Jonathan Hickman took over and the House of X and all of this stuff with Krakoa up to now. So that was pretty fun to hear. Also, they told a story about how writer Jerry Dugan threatened somebody in the parking lot with a shillelagh. So, fun stuff like that as well. So, you can check out our recap of that panel as well as just watch the full panel on there. And it was a pretty fun one if you're into Marvel Comics.
So Scarlet Witch is dead right now in the comics.
Yes,
and how long will that last?
Exactly. I love the way you worded that she is dead right now. I'm sure it won't be. I'm sure we'll see like Scarlet Witch #1 coming out in a few months.
That was the other thing, the other phenomenon that I feel like I was around for in the 90s. Like Superman was the first big one that I remember when they killed him off, but then they killed Mr. Fantastic and the Fantastic Four. And I remember like all the people writing in the letters page, and they'd be like, is he really dead? And they're like, yes, we swear he's really dead, he's never coming back. And then it was like 2-3 years later he was back.
Yeah I mean it's kind of a comic book trope. We even have the death of Doctor Strange coming up pretty soon, so
and now they like advertise it beforehand.
It's kind of hard. Like, you're not going to shock me with Doctor Strange's death in a book called The Death of Doctor Strange. So,
right.
It's you lose the shocking moment of his death, and you also have already lost the shock of his return because we know it's coming. You're not going to never write a Doctor Strange book again.
Yeah.
The second of the two Marvel panels from today was the Stan Lee, Marvel, and Rolling Stone panel, and from that title, I had no idea what I was getting into. But this was all about an article that came out in Rolling Stone 50 years ago that came from Robin Green, who was just coming off of being Stan Lee's assistant, and wrote this point of view article about what it was like to be working in the Marvel offices and working with Stan Lee on a day-to-day basis. And so pretty cool, peek behind the curtain of some Marvel history. This panel also featured Roy Thomas, the first Marvel editor-in-chief after Stan Lee, and then some other writers, Linda Fite, Gene Thomas, and Mimi Gold. And, just classic Marvel employees and writers, and got to talk about their experiences working with Stan Lee and some of the other classic, Marvel minds. And it was interesting hearing from Robin Green as well about this article and how she joked that first she explained that the article was never her idea. Rolling Stone actually was like sort of recruiting her more or less as a writer, and they said, what was your day like at Marvel? And she kind of told them, and then they were like, well, write that. And so that's how this article came to be. And she joked that they offered 5 cents a word for the article. And she ended up writing a 10,000 word article because of that. So
I'm trying to do the math. What would that have added up to?
I tried to add it up before if I could be completely wrong, but I believe that was $500. So not bad for, So yeah, that was a pretty interesting panel, just like a look back at some Marvel history there.
Cool.
So we'll jump from Marvel over to Star Wars. What did you get into today?
Yeah, so today was the Star Wars: The High Republic panel presented by Lucasfilm Publishing, and it was hosted by Christina Ariel, who's the host of the Star Wars: The High Republic show on Star Wars YouTube channel. And we had all 5 authors in addition to that. Charles Soule, Justina Ireland, Claudia Gray, Daniel Jose Older, and Cavan Scott. Look at that. Name them all without even checking, because I have been writing about the High Republic and talking about the High Republic since literally the day it was announced.
You've also spoken to most of them before, haven't you?
I've spoken to all of them.
Yeah.
I've interviewed them as a group when the first wave dropped back at the end of last year. And then I've now interviewed Cavan Scott and Daniel Jose Older for a half hour each on their own, which was really great. And might be doing Justina Ireland as well coming up soon. So awesome. I feel like I'm like on the front lines with the High Republic. I was there for the announcement in the Team Disney building at the Disney lot in Burbank. So that was super exciting. And I just feel like, I'm in tune with what's going on with the High Republic. I've seen so many interviews with these guys. They've had to repeat themselves over and over again, including in the interviews that I've done. But this was kind of more of the same. They kind of recapped a little bit about what's happened so far in the High Republic. They talked about the most recent books that each of them have written in the series, including the ones that just came out, which were The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott and Race to Crash Point Tower by Daniel Jose Older. And then now next week on Tuesday, we've got Out of the Shadows by Justina Ireland coming out. So they talked about all that. Talked about the comics as well, which are ongoing each month. There's 2 comic books, The High Republic and The High Republic Adventures. And then in addition to all that, they announced several new titles, of which I've got the information.
I would have been really impressed if you memorized all of those.
Right. See, now this stuff I haven't said 100 times or written 100 times, so I don't remember them. Okay. So very exciting. Claudia Gray, one of my favorite current Star Wars authors going back a few years. She wrote this book called Star Wars Bloodline, which I really, really loved. And she's done some other great stuff as well. She is writing the next adult book in the High Republic. It's called The Fallen Star. And then Daniel Jose Older's doing the next young adult book in the High Republic. It's called Midnight Horizon. Justina Ireland is doing the next middle grade book called Mission to Disaster. And then Charles Soule announced that he is writing a 2-part comic book miniseries for Marvel called Star Wars: The High Republic, Eye of the Storm. And that's going to focus on the main villain of the series named Marchion Ro, who's the head of this group called the Nile, this like band of marauders. And he's going to get like an origin story basically in that comic.
Awesome. So if I've wanted to get into some of the Star Wars comics and the books and stuff. It's just I'm so backed up on Marvel stuff as it is that I just barely. And then I mean, how much content do we have hitting Disney Plus on a weekly basis at this point too?
Right.
And so if I was going to pick up one of the comics or one of the books, what would you recommend?
I actually think both comics are really good. The main Marvel one is probably my favorite, the one written by Cavan Scott.
Okay.
I really like the art. I really like the writing. It's really crisp, and the action is really fun. But also, I was kind of surprised, especially this week's issue, how much I'm liking the IDW High Republic Adventures comic as well. It's just kind of a different take, and it skews a little bit younger. It's for a slightly younger audience, but in this week's issue, like the Jedi Padawans got to go to the Hutt planet called Nal Hutta, and they're like negotiating a peace treaty, and of course it goes wrong. But yeah, I enjoyed that as well. And then the novels are going to be probably a little, because there's more of them and it takes longer to read them. It's going to be tougher to like go through all of them at this point.
Right.
And we're really just the beginning, which is like kind of the funny thing. Like High Republic is going to have 3 years worth of content overall, and we're halfway through the first year, So I think if you wanted to pick up one book, the good place to start would be Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule, the first one. Yeah.
Gotcha. It's crazy to hear that we are just halfway through the first year of High Republic. I'm following your coverage of it. I feel like it's been years at this point.
I know. It's been a lot. Like, I am kind of surprised that they planned it out. I mean, I'm glad that they planned it out in advance. Like, okay, this is the problem that people have identified with the Star Wars sequel trilogy is that it didn't have consistent creative leadership, and it wasn't really planned out. It didn't really know where it was going. It was kind of like a game of telephone in Star Wars. So now you have, with the High Republic, you have this core team of writers. They're all working together. They all know how it ends. They've said it. They've told me they know how it ends. So that's good. And then they're kind of allowing themselves to surprise themselves along the way as well. So it's not like every tiny little story moment is planned out, but they do have an end point in sight. But it's just a tremendous amount of content, which is surprising to me that they would plan to have that much without knowing like how successful it was going to be from the beginning. But it's impressive at the same time that they were willing, Lucasfilm was willing to commit to that, and that the writers were willing to commit to basically like more than 3 years worth of work. But I'm enjoying it. I think it's pretty solid so far.
Yeah, I think that sort of bet on yourself mentality is a lot easier when you have a brand like Star Wars or like Marvel that you can slap on the front of every book and comic. But yeah, that's exciting. I like I said, I wanted to dive into all of this content. I'm just so backed up. I will probably take the Benji method and wait for some of these comics to hit Marvel Unlimited and sort of binge through them then.
How long? So I only like reading paper comics. I'm a bit of a Luddite in that way, but how long does it take for the Marvel comics to hit Marvel Unlimited?
It's been a little bit quicker lately. For example, King and Black, one of the recent big crossover events in comics that I'm sure people that have watched all of our videos are sick of me talking about at this point. But that actually, the first couple issues debuted on Marvel Unlimited before the event even ended. So it was within a couple of months, maybe even a little less than that. So it's fairly quickly.
Okay.
So completely changing gears, getting into our final panel that we covered today, jumping out of Marvel and Star Wars and getting back to what I talked about earlier about how, we cover these things that we've never really followed before and end up, in this case, loving it. And this panel was Duncanville, the animated series from 20th Television Animation. The panel featured executive producers Mike Scully and Julie Thacker Scully, hopefully I pronounced that right. Amy Poehler, who's also an executive producer and star of the show. She actually voices two or multiple characters, but two of the main characters. Ty Burrell, Ricky Lindholm, Joy Osmansky, Yasser Lester, and then Betsy Sidaro, who are all cast members of the show. And this is from the creators of The Simpsons, and in that same vein as Simpsons, Family Guy. I actually find it compares probably most to Bob's Burgers. I think it's probably the closest comparison. And I started watching this show recently, knowing that it was coming up in ComicCon at home, and absolutely loved it. I'm hooked. I can't wait for season 2. Actually starts next week or this Sunday, I believe. So definitely looking forward to that. It's a very fun, hilarious show. It's you kind of have to it's that stupid sort of sense of humor that, again, comparing to Bob's Burgers and Family Guy, stuff like that, I would say closer to those than to Simpsons probably, but a lot of fun and just absolutely ridiculous. So they showed multiple clips from this upcoming second season. They also confirmed for us that it's already been renewed for a season 3. So clearly they're doing something right with this show. Ty Burrell, who plays the father on the show, was asked if his character's name is Jack, and Ty Burrell is obviously also famously the father Phil Dunphy on Modern Family, and he was asked, who would you rather have as your father? Would it be Jack or Phil? And he said very easily it would be Phil. Jack is not the ideal father, I suppose. But they got into just a lot of fun questions like that. Osmansky, who plays Jing, the youngest daughter in the family, talked about some musical aspects of a future episode coming up in season 2. So that was a lot of fun. They actually showed a clip because Wiz Khalifa is actually a member of the cast as well, and
right.
They showed a clip of this musical episode where Wiz Khalifa had a song in it. So it was, and they kept calling it very Disney-esque in terms of the musical stylings. And it was definitely along those lines. So it was a lot of fun. Such a difference from the rest of the show. But yeah, just a lot of fun for sure. So, and one more note, actually, they talked about some of the upcoming guest stars that they're excited about, and that includes Jason Schwartzman, Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things, and Stephen King even makes an appearance in the show. So lots of interesting additions to the cast coming up. So yeah, that is it for our first day of for the most part, it's our first day of. I keep wanting to say San Diego Comic-Con now, but it's Comic-Con at home. We do have the Her Universe fashion show later tonight that Becca will be covering, so we'll have some coverage of that. That should be fun. I'm not sure how they do that virtually. I guess that's just probably a lot more fun in person, I would guess.
Yeah,
but should still be fun to check out what Her Universe has to show off. And then tomorrow, like we said, that's our busy day. I know you have a lot going on. You've got actually seemingly the rest of the animation domination lineup. Basically, you've got Simpsons, Family Guy, then American Dad's not on that lineup anymore, is it?
It's not on Fox anymore, but there is a panel tomorrow.
Okay.
And Central Park, I'm doing.
Right. Yeah, so you've got a lot going on. I've got Black Panther: Tales of Wakanda, which is a very interesting new novel that obviously ties into the fan favorite Marvel character, and then a very vaguely named Marvel exhibition. So I don't know. I'm excited whatever that might be. I wouldn't expect anything too huge because we do know that Marvel Studios is not dropping any new information on us, unfortunately. But so it should still be some fun coverage tomorrow, and then there's we'll be back live recapping everything. Let me see if I can get the time right. 1 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. We'll be back with Becca, who will be able to break down some of tell us about the experience with the Her Universe fashion show as well.
Is Tony going to join us? Because I see Tony's doing the Disney television animation panel.
I know Tony is busy, gallivanting around Dollywood right now. So I'm not sure if he's going to be joining us, but hopefully, maybe we can coax him in to join us for a little talk about Comic-Con at home.
Fair enough.
But yeah, we will be back tomorrow. Thank you everybody for watching, and come back tomorrow and keep following along on laughingplace.com for all of our coverage from Comic-Con at home. Bye everyone.